Good morning. Today I will discuss on the function of Lady Macbeth in Macbeth and the presentation of Lady Macbeth in Macbeth by Shakespeare. Shakespearean tragedies, as you know, the famous four Shakespearean tragedies were named on the main characters, that means the male characters, obviously, who is predominating these plays. Say, for example, these are Hamlet, Macbeth, Othello, and King Lear. You know, all the four characters, whether it is Hamlet or Macbeth or Othello or King Lear, they are the male characters, obviously. So the question is, where are the female characters, or why are the female characters to be considered as unimportant there? It is obviously not. Somehow, whenever we read Shakespearean plays, we find that in the tragedies, the male characters are predominating. Whereas in case of Shakespearean comedies, the female characters are obviously dominating. Somehow, in case of the Shakespearean comedies, as you know, that in Twelfth Night there is Viola, there is Olivia. The characters are obviously more important than the characters like Duke Orsino. In case of As You Like It, we know Rosalind is a very important character. In case of Merchant of Venice, we find that Portia is obviously one of the chief nourishers of the theme of the plays. Somehow, in case of the Shakespearean tragedies, we find that the characters, like, say, for example, in case of Hamlet, Ophelia represents feminine meekness, right? In case of King Lear, we find that Cordelia represents feminine fortitude. In case of Othello, we find Desdemona represents feminine nobility. And in case of Macbeth, we find that Lady Macbeth is being presented as feminine wickedness. The purpose of this lecture is to represent Lady Macbeth, or is to comment on the function of Lady Macbeth in Macbeth, obviously. Lady Macbeth, as I've already mentioned, that Lady Macbeth is representing feminine wickedness. But the question is, in to what extent Lady Macbeth has to be considered as important in Macbeth, you know? And somehow another topic that I have to discuss on, it is Lady Macbeth's presentation, whether Lady Macbeth is representing a kind of gender ambiguity or not. I'm reading from a particular section. Here it says, Lady Macbeth is a study in wickedness, but she is wicked with a difference. Indeed, though she, like other women characters, represents a specific aspect of feminine character, she doesn't remain a type character. In her character, wickedness and womanliness stand in almost equal proportions. She is less cruel and vicious than Aeschylus's Clytemnestra and less violent than Euripides' Medea. She is in no way an idealist like Sophocles' Antigone, but she is with a definite motto in life, and she is single minded. Her husband is a hero who commits heinous crime, and Shakespeare offers him a competent wife with a man within her. In this respect, Lady Macbeth, by her character and role, represents gender ambiguity, like the witches who are female but have beards. Somehow, the function of the gender ambiguity. What do you mean by gender ambiguity? Generally, in general concepts, we find that there is a particular kind of a binary is being conceptualized in the plays, in the novels, and in the literature, obviously. Somehow the male prerogatives lead them to cruelty. The male prerogatives lead them to some kind of, you say, uh, the cruel representations of their power, right? And somehow the females have been always been presented as something opposite to the male vigor, you see, the male prowess, the male courage. Okay, all these things are generally being stereotyped. All these things are generally being considered to be at a different direction. Somehow, whenever in literature we find that a female is breaking the binary, okay, then we find that some manliness is being imposed on her. But fundamentally, these are different issues. And in case of the Elizabethan period, in case of the Elizabethan plays, we didn't have to think about the gender issues. You see, somehow in Lady Macbeth, okay, we find that Lady Macbeth is being conceptualized as the fourth witch of the play. Right. Think about the witches. In my previous lecture, I have told you about the role of the witches and how so far that the witches are representing the male and female both things in them, or both identities in them. In case of Lady Macbeth, we can find that Shakespeare is imposing, or Shakespeare is referring to multiple issues relating to the the womanliness has to be negated and manliness has to come there. Why? Because the main or the male figure, and the male here typical heroic figures of the Elizabethan period, they are always attached with killing others, you see. Whereas in case if you think of the female, if you think about the woman, generally what we find in the Elizabethan plays, that the women are always being associated with uh, giving lives, obviously. That means fundamentally you will find that there is a kind of a binary that have been projected, whereas the male figure is being associated with taking lives or killing persons. The female figures have been related with giving lives. That means the matter of procreation. Okay, that is the fertility that is at the primary focus of these things. Somehow, when Lady Macbeth is directly taking part in the scheming, that means killing Duncan and becoming the queen, that is the fundamental issue. And when you find that in the killing procedure, when Lady Macbeth is to some extent helping Macbeth, okay, so the question certainly arises whether Lady Macbeth has to be considered as a quote unquote true woman or not. As I've already suggested, that the women are always being considered as the epitome of creation, okay, not destruction. So somehow the question certainly arises whether Lady Macbeth can be conceptualized as that kind of woman or not. That is why the gender issue is being considered here. Let me read a particular portion from Macbeth, and then we will give the basic implications that it conveys. I am reading Act 1, Scene 5 from Macbeth. Here we find that Lady Macbeth is reading a letter. Okay, so I'm reading from they met me in the day of success, and I have learned by the perfectest report they have more in them than mortal knowledge. When I burned in desire to question them further, they made themselves ear. These they are actually referring to the witches, and Macbeth is reporting Lady Macbeth that what he had faced, into which they vanished. Whilst I stood wrapped in the wonder of it, came the missives means messengers, from the king, who all hailed me Thane of Cawdor, by which title before these weird sisters, these are the witches, saluted me and referred me to the coming on of time, with hail king that shalt be. This have I thought good to deliver thee, my dearest partner of greatness, that thou mightst not lose the dues of rejoicing by being ignorant of what greatness is promised thee. Lay it to thy heart and farewell. So that was the letter that Macbeth wrote from the warfield, from the particular section where he met the witches. And look at the immediate reaction after reading this letter. What Lady Macbeth says. Lady Macbeth says, Glamis thou art, and Cawdor, and shalt be what thou art promised. Yet do I fear thy nature. It is too full of the milk of human kindness to catch the nearest way. So somehow in this particular play, you will find that Lady Macbeth is always instigating Macbeth into doing this particular action, what the witches are actually doing. As in my last lecture, I have already suggested about the witches' schemes. Fair is foul and foul is fair. Over to the fog and fill the air, and they are almost creating a kind of trap for Macbeth. Just why? Just because to lead Macbeth into destruction. Somehow, Lady Macbeth is also doing the same. Here she says that it is too full of milk of human kindness to catch the nearest way. So the question is, what is the nearest way? You know that whenever you will think of Macbeth, you will find that Macbeth is somehow, he is not a true legal heir of Duncan. That means after the death of Duncan, it must not be that Macbeth will become the next king, right? Because there is Malcolm, there is also Donalbain. So somehow the nearest way to become the king, because as Macbeth is not in the proper lineage, that's why Macbeth, in general way, Macbeth cannot become the king, right? So to become the king, Macbeth has to kill Duncan and usurp the throne, right? So the problem is Macbeth is not of that type. If he were of that type, then he would probably uh, did that earliest or at the earliest. So here it says, yet do I fear the nature. The nature is the main problematic issue. It is too full of the milk of human kindness to catch the nearest way. You see that the term like milk of human kindness, why the term milk is being referred to here? You will find that in a later section, Lady Macbeth will consider that girl or venom is more necessary than the milk, because milk is the nourisher. Milk is something with the help of which it is the feeding procedure, that a child is gradually becoming a grown up person. So, kindness, human kindness, and milk, these are the terms that are generally being associated with the feminine enterprises. Somehow, when Lady Macbeth says it is too full of the milk of human kindness to catch the nearest way, that actually implicates that Macbeth doesn't have that particular tendency in him. Macbeth doesn't have that particular cruelty in him to kill Duncan and become the king. So that's why, or that is the particular portion where Lady Macbeth has to act. Here she says, it is too full of the milk of human kindness to catch the nearest way. Thou wouldst be great, art not without ambition, but without the illness should attend it. Right? What thou wouldst highly, that thou wouldst holily. Wouldst not play false, and yet wouldst wrongly win. So these are the antithetical or paradoxical references that she is getting. It indicates that Macbeth is not without ambition, but Macbeth doesn't want to attend it in a will way. And also, what thou wouldst highly, that means what you desire highly, thou wouldst thou holily. That means you want to get that holily in a positive way. Wouldst not play false, and yet wouldst wrongly win. Thou wouldst have great Glamis, which cries, thus thou must do if thou have it, and that which rather thou dost fear to do than wishest should be undone. And then Lady Macbeth says, hide thee hither, that I may pour my spirits in thine ear, and chastise with the valour of my tongue that impedes thee from the golden round, which fate and metaphysical aid both doth seem to have thee crowned withal. That means here in this particular section, we can find that Lady Macbeth has already preparing the scheme for Macbeth. That somehow Lady Macbeth knows that Macbeth is suffering from a kind of a crisis. Why? Because in Macbeth, you can find that positive resources are always present. Macbeth is kind. Macbeth is without any adverse situations. You see that he doesn't want to create these things, and Lady Macbeth is implicating that somehow if Macbeth comes here, I will instigate Macbeth to do that. At this moment, a messenger enters. Lady Macbeth says, what is your tidings? Messenger says, the king comes here tonight. And Lady Macbeth says, thou art mad to say it. He is not the master with him. Who, were it so, would have been informed for preparation. Messenger answers, so please you, it is true. Our Thane is coming. One of my fellows had the speed of him, who almost dead for breath, had scarcely more than would make up his message. Lady Macbeth says, give him tending, he brings great news. And then the messenger exits. What happens, that Lady Macbeth finds at this particular situation, that Duncan is coming to Dunsinane. When Duncan is coming, that means Lady Macbeth could, flourish her schemes, right? And the immediate reaction to Lady Macbeth, that means it is a kind of a monologue. It's very important to make a character sketch on Lady Macbeth. It says the raven, it's a big kind of a crow. So it says the raven himself is hoarse that crooks the fatal entrance of Duncan under my battlements. So what happens here, that Lady Macbeth could find what the implications are actually suggesting. It indicates that Duncan is coming to Dunsinane, and he comes under the grip of Lady Macbeth. That means if Lady Macbeth wants to kill Duncan here at Dunsinane, it will be the apt moment to kill him and making Macbeth the king. And then the famous lines, these are the monologue, and obviously the lines are indicating some gender ambiguity that I have already suggested. What she says, come, it's some kind of an invocation, you see. Come, you spirits that tend on mortal thoughts. Unsex me here. You see the term unsex. She is summoning the spirits to come there and unsex her. She says, come, you spirits that tend on mortal thoughts. Unsex me here and fill me from the crown to the toe, top full of direst cruelty. That means the cruelty is needed. So essentially, what Lady Macbeth is suggesting here, that the cruelty, this particular thing, is almost missing from the woman perspectives. And that's why Lady Macbeth needs to invoke cruelty in her. She says, unsex me here and fill me from the crown to the toe, top full of direst cruelty. Make thick my blood. Stop up the access and passage to remorse, that no compunctious visitings of nature shake my fell purpose, nor keep peace between the effect and it. Make thick my blood. Why? Because the blood is flowing through hearts, you see. If the blood is being made thick, then ultimately the feelings and emotions and all the positive traits that are present within the human psyche, within the human heart, it must not reach the brain. So the blood has to be thick. Here she says, make thick my blood, stop up the access and passage to remorse, that no compunctious visitings of nature shake my fell purpose. That means so that I will remain, stick to my purposes, right? Nor keep peace between the effect and it. And then she says, come to my woman's breasts. You see, breast is this particular organ, or this body part has to be considered as the chief nourisher. Why? Because the milk, as I've already suggested, milk is referring to the concept of mother, and so did breast. So somehow, whenever you are thinking about nourishment, whenever you are thinking about upbringing, whenever you are thinking about the giving birth to the child and procreation issues, you will find that the woman's breasts are always necessary. Here she says, come to my woman's breasts and take my milk for girl. So a venom has to be transformed. Why? Because milk is the nourisher, and girl, or the venom, it is the particular thing, with the help of which you can kill others. It is not giving birth, rather it was killing somebody. So come to my woman's breasts and take my milk for girl. You murdering ministers, wherever in your sightless substances you wait on nature's mischief, come thick night and pearl thee in the dunnest smoke of hell, that my keen knife see not the wound it makes, nor heaven peep through the blanket of the dark to cry, hold, hold. So that is Lady Macbeth. So somehow you will find that this particular invocation section actually gives light to on Lady Macbeth's character. Lady Macbeth is suffering. Lady Macbeth is, to some extent, she's thinking about this particular form. Lady Macbeth is, and when Macbeth enters, Lady Macbeth, the first thing that Lady Macbeth does, she says, "Great Glamis, worthy Cawdor, greater than both by the all hail hereafter." That is the king actually. The laters have transported me beyond this ignorant present, and I feel now the future in the instant. Macbeth says, "My dearest love, Duncan comes here tonight, and when goes hence? Tomorrow, as he purposes." What she says, "Oh, never shall sun that morrow see." Sun will not see that morrow. Here, sun is representing, at one point, it is referring to the morning next morning, at another point, it is referring to Duncan. The Duncan will not see the next light. So, you can find here that in this particular reference, Lady Macbeth has already schemed the thoughts, you see. The scheme is already being located, the scheme is already being structured. She knows very well what will happen next. Lady Macbeth says, "Your face, my then, is as a book where men may read strange matters. To beguile the time, look like the time. Bear welcome in your eye, your hand, your tongue. Look like the innocent flower, but be the serpent under it." That is a very famous and very problematic line, you see. Look like the innocent flower, but be the serpent under it. That it might be possible that your mind is, it's calculating, your mind is scheming to kill others, but in your face, it must not be laid open. So look like the innocent flower, but be the serpent under it. He that is coming must be provided for, and you shall put this night's great business into my dispatch, which shall to all our nights and days to come give solely sovereign sway and mustard. But Macbeth is flying from the situation. He says, "We will speak further." Lady Macbeth says, "Only look up clear. To alter favor ever is to fear. Leave all the rest to me." So she knows. She knows her capabilities. That is Lady Macbeth. So you cannot find that Lady Macbeth is just here to help Macbeth. Rather, you have to consider that Lady Macbeth is obviously an important character in Macbeth. Lady Macbeth is instigating Macbeth, and without Lady Macbeth, probably Macbeth wouldn't have successfully done this particular work, that is killing Duncan. And somehow, for this particular reason, Lady Macbeth needs to deconstruct her own identity. Okay, it is the how we can consider that Lady Macbeth is Lady Macbeth has that particular the weaker sections in her mind. It will be discussed later. Okay, so it will be discussed in our next video.